In this video, I'm going to tell you about 5 ways that water can make your wildlife photography better. This is 5 for Friday. In the last 5 for Friday, I talked about how water can be a danger to your camera gear. In this video, I'm also going to talk about water, but this time I'm going to talk about how water can improve your wildlife photography images. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is reflections. When the subject of your image is near a body of water, there's often an opportunity to capture reflections of the subject in that water. These reflections can be mesmerizing, and the detail in the reflection provides the viewer of the image with a clue as to the state of the water. If the water is very still, the reflection will be highly detailed. If there are ripples in the water, the reflection will be disturbed. One of the things that's really important is to ensure that you have space in your composition to capture the reflection that you want. Just like you have to make a decision as to whether to crop the subject, you also need to make a similar decision as to whether to crop the reflection. In this image where the bears are standing, I managed to capture the entire reflection, but I had to go into portrait to do it. In these images, the reflection is cropped. I was shooting in landscape and I was using a prime lens, and I didn't step back far enough to capture the entire reflection. If you're shooting a subject or subjects that move around a lot, it can be a challenge to always capture the entire reflection. Now let's talk about using water to create minimalist images. In every one of the images you'll see here, water takes up at least 50% of the space in the image. Often we struggle to capture the environment. We get too focused on the subject and it's very easy to get in too tight. But with water, sometimes we have no option. And in addition, water has a wonderful texture to it. It could be very still, or it could have ripples, or it could be mixed with some mud, or there could be some splashes or waves in the water, and all of these things can be wonderful to capture. When we include a large amount of water in our image, we create an image which is very minimalist, where the subject is really just the focus of the image and there's not much else left in terms of distractions, but yet what is there is often very interesting. Another way that water can be used to great effect is to capture a very, very brief moment in time that you can't really see with the naked eye, but you can capture it by using a very fast shutter speed. It's really incredible what you can see when you do this. Check out the sheets of water in these images with the bears wrestling. And in some of these images you'll see long chains of water droplets, sometimes mixed with sand or other sediment. In these images you have water spray that's flying almost 20 feet up in the air, way above the bears. All of these images were captured with a shutter speed of at least 1/2500th of a second, sometimes as much as 1/4000th of a second. When you're capturing something like this, you're capturing something that someone would never normally see, and that can really create a lot of interest in your images. These are hooper swans that I photographed in Hokkaido, Japan. They're very large birds and require quite a long runway to take off and land, and at times they're literally walking on the water. This is not something that you can usually see, but using the camera and a fast enough shutter speed, you can capture these very unique moments in time. Now let's talk about the idea of using water to create the perspective that you're down very low, either creating a very special direct connection with your wildlife subject, or perhaps they don't know you're there and you're viewing them from a hidden place. When we get down low to photograph wildlife, we get further into their world, and we also create a perspective that makes them larger in the images. When we photograph an animal on land, we will typically lie down to get this perspective, but when it comes to water, you may be possibly shooting from a boat, but you may actually also be in the water, and regardless of whatever the case may be, when you create the right perspective, you'll often have the viewer wondering if you were indeed in the water with the animals. It just so happens that all of these images you've been seeing here of these bears from Alaska were taken when I was indeed standing in the water. However, all of the images you'll see now were taken when I was in a boat. These were typically taken either lying down or crouching down very low, just to get that same really low perspective. Another way you can do this if your game is to hang your camera over the edge of the boat and use a tilt-up screen just to compose your shots. If you do this, you just have to be very careful not to drop your camera in the water. And finally, let's talk about how you can capture movement in the water to make an image more dynamic. I'm not talking about water flying everywhere and using a fast shutter speed to freeze the droplets. Instead, I'm talking about small movements where you can actually exaggerate them by using a slower shutter speed. For example, in this image of a bear biting into a fish, I used a shutter speed of 1/125th of a second just to create a bit of motion blur in the fish's tail. In this image, the ripples in the water are very small, but you can tell that they were caused by the bear drinking, especially because there's a little drop of water hanging from its lips. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.